och välkomna till Wine Table. Ikväll har vi finbesök här i studion av GD Vajra. Och de levererar inte bara viner i absolut toppklass, utan de är också en av de första producenterna som faktiskt gjorde ekologiskt vin i Piemonte. Men innan vi går in på den här huvudpersonen så ska vi bara dra lite små saker. Vi kommer att hålla på i ungefär en timme och ni vet att ni kan ställa frågor och ställ så många ni bara kan. Det här är en unik chans att få veta riktigt mycket om den här regionen, producenten och de här vinerna. Och det är ju också så att vi har alltid en tävling, så ni som ställer frågor i de här kommentarsfälten har ju möjlighet att vinna 2 stycken fina vinglas från Riedel. Och de glasen som vi har på utlottning idag, det är inte mindre än Riedels Veloce. Och det här är deras Pinot Nebbiolo. Lämpligt, va? Jag tänker att vi ska alldeles snart dra igång den här sändningen och jag ska få be att presentera vår huvudperson. Giuseppe, welcome.
Grazie.
Yeah. It's so nice to have you here.
It's a joy to be here.
How's it been, the days in Stockholm?
It's been gorgeous. I heard it was a cold spring, but maybe we brought the sun because it's been 2 amazing days.
Fantastic. Before we start, we're going to start with this wine, but before we do that, I think because you have such an amazing and interesting history when it comes to your company, and it was your father who
Yes.
was who is the man behind the whole thing. Can you just tell the audience a bit on how he started everything?
Absolutely, and it's actually a beautiful story and a fun one. It all started a day of May 1968. It was the beginning of the hippie protests.
Yeah.
The streets of Torino were crowded with young kids protesting against the status quo. And there was a man looking off the window of the army headquarters. And through the yard of the HQ of the army and a busy crowd, he spotted a familiar face and squeezed his eyes, looked better, and down there was his boy who was 15 years old. The guy at the window was my grandfather. The guy in the crowd was my dad. Giuseppe, my grandfather, and Aldo, my father. We never understood what happened that night. I think it was...
But your grandfather was not happy.
Clearly not. That's why. I think it was a locked story.
Yeah.
And but we know that within 24 hours, Aldo was sent back to the farm to spend the rest of summer in the middle of nowhere. Today, Barolo is world known, but it was really hard to get to the village in those days, and it was meant to be a bit of a punishment. And through the summer, he felt in love to that life. In short, he was the only kid of his generation born in a city who chose to become a contadino, a farmer.
Yeah.
Such was the passion he found, the beauty he found, the freedom he found in the countryside. So out of his generation, Aldo's been really the only kid who made a choice and a move. It was the hardest days. People were actually fleeing the countryside, finding better possibilities in the city. That's the start of GD Vajra.
And has he been like a revolutionist when it comes to wine as well, and not just the political thing?
I think so.
Yeah.
I love to think that instead of doing a revolution in the city, he went on to do a revolution in the countryside.
Yeah.
Most likely it was the first vineyards to be organically farmed in the region. We did promote biodiversity back in the 70s and 80s before it was a theme.
Yeah.
By the 90s, one day I was with my little sister Francesca on the school bus coming back from school. We realized that we had tall grass in the vineyards. Now we call it cover crop.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was something rather unique that almost scared me. It was like, why are our vineyards different? So it's been quite a journey of little and big revolutions.
And do you have anything of that in you?
Well, yes, I think I think in a more polished way, maybe. But one of the wines we're gonna taste today has been a creation of mine with my siblings, with the whole family and team. But I think
A little bit, at least.
yeah, I think it's about finding not trying to copy, but finding the soul of all things.
Yeah.
That's what we try to do.
And a balance, perhaps. We're going to start off with a nice rosé, and it's not that I'm trying to just be nice, but this is actually one of my favorite rosés. I think it's an absolute, well done. I think it's an absolutely beautiful wine. So it's the Rosabella, and lots of things we can say about this wine, but I can say one thing, and I think, and that goes for all your wines, you have the most amazing labels. I think looking at this, you just want to you know, go to the beach and swim in the ocean and be happy and have sunshine. It's absolutely fabulous.
Well, credits where credits are due. This has been one of the greatest artists we had in the region who designed all of the classic labels of Vajra. His name was Gianni Gallo, and we try to choose the designs that capture the essence of every wine. And clearly, Rosabella is about the perfumes, the florals, the fruits of the spring and early summer, and that's what we have on the label of Rosabella.
I can see that clearly. So, first wine then, the rosé. So what can you say about this? I mean, you obviously just said a few things about the label and maybe the intention of the wine.
Well, this was one of the earlier rosé produced in Piemonte. We have to go back to 2004. It was before the Provence craving. So rosé was a strange animal and very much regarded with suspect in those days.
Yeah.
We were welcoming our first Australian intern ever, and this is quite a funny story because there was a miscommunication. So we thought we were about to receive a 18-year-old Aussie backpacker in shorts and boots, and when the guy shows up, he's actually a grown-up young man. He has a wife and 2 kids traveling with him.
Really?
Thankfully, on the first day he was working in the cellar, some Australian visitors walk in and they look at Steve and they're like, oh my God, Steve Panelli is working with you. He was pretty much a star back in Australia. At the time, he was leading one of Australia's most important wineries. He was selecting wines for the national airline, and he had been nominated twice Best Australian Winemaker. And he chose to quit it all to come and learn about Nebbiolo in
and
a
you
small
didn't know
family
this?
farm. No, there was a well, don't ask me what happened, but I was too young to be involved at the time, but that's how it started. And it was the start of an amazing friendship. It was a great harvest together with Steve. He had this beautiful little kid running around the farm. Her name was Bella. And with Aldo and Steve started dreaming of a rosé wine, and we just felt it was a good name to call it Rosabella.
Oh, that's sweet.
So
that's a beautiful story.
It's a Nebbiolo-driven rosé, but with small contributions of dolcetto and barbera. Just like a plane needs flaps to fly well. So as we pick this fruit much earlier than the usual Nebbiolo season, we like to have small contributions of the sister grapes to find the most beautiful balance we can for every vintage.
So when it comes to rosé in the region, you say this was, were you early making rosé, you would say? Were you one of the early ones?
It was early, pioneering days for rosé. In fact, in those early days, the wine was darker in color, and it took us a journey to refine the winemaking and find a more graceful style as it is today.
It's beautiful. So when you taste this wine, what do you... Because to me, there's a lot of fruit, obviously. And it almost tastes like the label looks like, in a sense, with all the flowers and the pink flowers. And it's very, as you say, it's very gentle, it's very refined, but also the color. I mean, I usually say that if I drink rosé, I really don't want the rosé to be too pale and just taste like a white wine, because if it does, I can drink white wine. This is rather pale, but it has so much intensity.
Well, we would like the wine to keep a Piemontese accent, to have a voice that is authentic to the region, authentic to the grapes, and especially of Nebbiolo. For me, it's about a floral tapenade, like walking over a carpet of beautiful flowers in the spring, and then you start perceiving the strawberry, the raspberry, the gentle mountain red berries, and then there's almost like a beautiful marl powder, like a feeling of something that is mineral and reminiscent of the terroir of the region. And in the palate, I'm very much in love with this 24 vintage, because I find it's a very, if you allow me to say, spheric wine. It's like it's round, but not round because it's sweet. It's actually rather dry. Yeah. But round just because of a balance of all elements.
And because sometimes the audience ask when it comes to food combinations.
Well, I don't want to kill the question, but let me say that wine, I believe that good wine is like good music. I might not speak Swedish or Spanish or other languages, but when was to listen to a beautiful Swedish song, I'm sure it would touch my heart.
Yeah.
Similarly, I think good wine can pierce through barriers, and in a way it's simple for our heart to perceive. This is to me a general rule of wine. This being said, I can't think of Rosabella and not think of it on a patio in the summer, especially a beautiful Swedish long lighted night.
Yeah.
I could see this wine easily going with the amuse-bouche and the appetizers, but because it is Nebbiolo base, it has enough backbones and edges to sort of bridge into the real meal, whether it is a pasta or a lighter pizza combination.
Yeah, I can just feel that we have a really nice evening to look forward to. You know, the things you're saying about the wines are quite poetic. No, it's a lovely wine, and I agree with you. I can see all of that at the same time, almost. So, are you happy moving on to the next one? We have 6 wines.
I'm delighted.
Yeah. So we have chosen to pour all the wines in like a Pinot Noir glass. And you were, I liked your comment because I talked to you about the glasses. And you were like, yeah, you know, it's not really that important, you know, as long as the glass is a good glass.
Yeah, I think Piemonte and Burgundy sort of share a profile of perfumey wines that are not as full-bodied as wines from southern regions and more sunny regions. So I think as long as we are in a profile that we call Nebbiolo Pinot Noir, I think the wines will resonate and be happy. And I'm also, my wife and I have 4 little kids.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're rushing to the table and you're happy enough that you have a nice glassware, but you're not going to strategize too much on which one, as long as it gets to the table in time. So
and you have the time to have a glass, maybe.
Exactly. It might be a phase of life, but I'm in a phase where as long as it's good glassware, I'm happy with.
Okay, cool. So this is now the first red wine, and I'm going to pour you some. It's the Lange Rosso. Also again, with that beautiful label. And we tasted the wines beforehand just to make sure that they were all fine. And they are. But I think in terms of this one, before we go into talking about the actual wine, if you can just say something about the appellation or the origin Lange, because that's quite a broad region, so to speak, or a broad appellation.
Absolutely. Lange is the name of our broad region. If we could imagine to zoom in from a satellite, we would see Piemonte as a whole. Piemonte being the region at the foot of the mountains. That's the meaning of Piede del Monte. We zoom in at the very south of the region. We find a region of hills, tiny, a small one, and those are the Langhe. And Langhe is a beautiful name because it comes from the ancient Piemontese language, where that was sort of closer to French than to Italian, really, where Langhe means tongues of land, because these hills have been shaped by natural elements over millions of years to be looking as tongues of land emerging from a sea of clouds in the fall season. So that's the Langhe. In more recent days, around 1993, Langhe also became the DOC, so the designated name for the same region. And at that time, it became the more flexible designation. It would allow people creativity. For some, what we call the modernists, it became the chance to explore with international varieties. For our family, it became the chance to actually focus on native grapes, but with the liberty to blend them together, just like a nod to the old farming tradition.
Yeah, but also, I mean, looking at the region and the evolution that Piemonte has been through, basically from the 80s and onwards, if I'm correct, with the Barolo Wars and everything in the back. It's quite interesting to see. I mean, looking at what we can find in Sweden now, there's a lot of Lange wines, and I think maybe people don't really know exactly what it is. So it's good to just explain. So
no, I think it's a great point, and I think this has been also the evolution in the last 10 years. There's been a growing number of Lange wines produced as a blend. Where I think we try to be original with this wine is to be a bit of a champion of biodiversity. In fact, it's a blend of Nebbiolo, Barbera, Dolcetto, but we have some more obscure varieties like Freisa. Freisa is a grape with an amazing heritage, but unfortunately very rare today. Albarossa, very obscure, and the heirloom Slarina and Chartreuse, two grapes that were almost disappeared
Never
a
heard of
century
those.
ago. Well, you'll get a whiffle of them in this blend.
So you grow all these grapes? Or
Yes.
Okay. So how much do you have of all these obscure ones?
Well, in fact, last week we just planted a new parcel of Slarina. That's how excited we are. It's our third vineyard. The total surface is tiny.
And is
It's
it
about
native to
2
Piemonte?
hectares. Yes. So pretty much phylloxera, which was this huge disease that devastated European viticulture a century ago, was a reset for viticulture. And so grapes that used to be grown earlier were kind of lost. And it's been an amazing work of our university, especially Anna Schneider, Stefano Raimondi. Let me mention two of my professors and two amazing people. You cannot avoid to fall in love with what they do when you hear them talking. That's the overwhelming passion they have. So imagine these two academics not feeling scared to go dirty in the vineyards, in the fields, talking to farmers, asking to visit their vineyards. They did an amazing work of research, and eventually were able to find and allow to protect and propagate some of these obscure grapes.
But you can see that, I think, all over the world of wine, in a sense. We've had lots of different producers here visiting us here at Wine Table, and you can see there is almost a demand. It's of going back to the roots in a way and try to find that what's original.
Absolutely.
And also sometimes we're using the old techniques when it comes to how you work your vineyards, but also how you make your wine, and find those old varieties and try to bring them back to life in a sense.
Absolutely, and I think it is a beautiful move because for a start it's rooted into humanity. I think we as people, we are eager to know ourselves better, and to know ourselves you have to know the roots, right? And so when it comes to wine, digging into history, digging into heritage, finding a way to make it alive, I think is a beautiful part of the journey. Now, I love a quote from Gustav Mahler, the Austrian composer.
Yeah.
He was clearly writing about his own music, but I think it well applies to wine. If you love tradition, that's what he was writing in his diaries, you want to keep the fire alive, you don't just adore the ashes. And I think it's a gorgeous metaphor that well applies to at least what we're trying to do. So it's a tradition with a fire inside, with a happiness, with a joy, with a life. It cannot just be a dusted museum. But if you manage to find that balance between the roots and the fire, I think is a lot of fun.
It is. So this wine, what's the aim of this wine then?
Well, it's the wine we would imagine to be on everyone's table as the household choice. So what are we expecting from a wine that is maybe simpler, but also wine that we are going to drink more frequently? Is the same expectation we would have for a good friend. And we all know that the best friends are people with whom we have a dialogue. They don't have the biggest ego. They don't invade the room with their presence. They create a dialogue. And similarly, we're looking at a wine that we wish will create a dialogue with the people and the food and diverse dishes around the table. It should be rich enough to complement a red meat, but it should be fine and delicate enough to pair with a pasta, joyful to go with a pizza. You shouldn't have to worry twice about popping a cork of Langhe or opening a bottle of the Langhe Rosso.
No, I mean it's very refined. It's super balanced. It's just very enjoyable to drink. In Sweden we say that it has no bones in it. It wants.
Well, Piemonte, I love the phrase, I might borrow it. Piemonte is a region with many bones. And that's, I think, the other aspect about the Langhe Rosso. It's...
because of
would you allow me a
Sure,
silly metaphor? This shouldn't be recorded, really. But imagine that you invite people who just moved to the apartment next to you. They're new to the city. They just move in there, and you want to be hospitable. You
Sure.
want to give them a good impression. You want them to feel welcomed. But what if they walk into your home, and the first thing they see is a big dog barking? If they love the dogs, no problem. But it might not be the good welcome for everyone. So not having the bonds, it doesn't mean diverting route or changing home. It's simply a genuine welcome to Piemonte, but we keep the bonds, or we keep the big dog in the backyard. And that's the joy of letting all these grapes play together, is trying to find the most harmonious balance. And if you like the home, well, next time you come back, you'll discover maybe a pure Dolcetto or Barbera and raise up to Barolo.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a wine that I could drink like every day in every occasion, on every occasion. It's boneless in the best of ways. So we've just touched a bit on history and heritage, and it seems like you have a big passion for all of those things. And I think the next wine that we have is truly about that, because there you go. I read somewhere that if you are interested in the heritage and the history of the region, this is basically what you need to drink. So it's the Claret,
Yes.
also a Lange Nebbiolo, but a very different wine.
Yes, it's Claret JC, and this is a bit of a time machine to bring you back to a very specific moment in our wine history, because this wine is inspired by a book written in 1606. We have a big passion as a family for old wine books. At the winery, we now host a library, a collection of about 3,000 volumes on viticulture and winemaking, spanning from the late 1500s onward. And about 12, 13 years ago, I was on a hunt for some old volumes I heard I could find in a dusted warehouse in the region. And I show up there, and this dark, forgotten warehouse had more than I could imagine. So I came home with a car filled with books. But one of the most precious was actually the most unassuming of all of them. It was a very thin pamphlet, and I only started to read it when I was back home. And it turned out it had been written in 1606 by a man by the name of Giambattista Croce. Did some research on the guy. His main job was to be the royal jeweler of the House of Savoy, the kings of Piemonte.
Wow.
So that was his job. But in the preface of the book, you read he's actually a good winemaker, and many people have been asking him how is he making his wines, and so he decided to write the book. It's a painful reading, because I don't know how it was Swedish 4 centuries ago, but our language was definitely tricky, at least for me to comprehend. It's a slow reading. Thankfully, Croce wrote the book with, I guess, the same attention for detail he must have had in doing his jewels, and so it's the most thorough, precise protocol of winemaking you could imagine. What blew my mind was finding that one of these protocols was for a wine called Chiaretto. And Chiaretto pretty much means pale in color, clear in color.
Yeah, like a claret.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Something that has been denied by many in the region. When I was 6 years old, our first grade teacher told us that before Barolo was invented, Nebbiolo was a light wine by mistake. But finding this book actually proved a different story altogether. It was about people were seeking for drinkability, were seeking for a clear, light style. So we had to try. I must admit it was not super easy to get an approval, because this was a completely different journey than what anyone had been doing and making. So we did some more research, we did some small trial experiment, and we've been producing this wine for 11 vintages now.
So the approval that you almost didn't get, was that from like the wine authorities, or was it from family?
That was the second concern. The first concern was to convince the family to get on board with trying to make a wine no one had ever experimented, tried, tasted, drunk for 4 centuries. But it's quite an amazing family, and so it was just about finding enough ground and share the dream well enough, and then we got clearance, and that's how we started to produce Claret JC. There are a few funny episodes on the way, because the first spelling of this wine was Claret, just like a Bordeaux wine.
Yeah.
It was a bit maybe naive, and we got a notified letter. I was in my 20s, and we got a serious letter from all the big lawyers of the Bordeaux Association. Quite scary. Anyway, just silly episodes, but we got to finally produce Claret JC. So when you'll drink it, it's going to be clearly, unmistakably Nebbiolo, but with a twist that you might have not tasted before.
It's, to me, it almost feels like it's very, the fruit is very pure, and it's almost like a perfume, a candy type of smell to it. And there's a bit of a resemblance to really nice Beaujolais in a way.
See, the two elements that make Chiaretto in the book be a standout protocol for me were about trying to keep a softer edge to the tannins, and keeping a little bit of bubbles. Imagine the book was written 200 years before microbiology, or Louis Pasteur even did his researches. So we're talking about very basic description of winemaking details, but you get the sense, and it's very clear that they were trying to keep a little liveliness to the wine. So to enhance that further, we have a partial carbonic maceration, and that is the bridge to Beaujolais, is that sense of like joyful spring fruit that enriches the senses.
And when it comes to, I mean, we just started with the two first red wines, but when it comes to aging of these wines,
well, these are the two wines that I would suggest drinking faster.
But can they age? I mean, if you
Yes,
buy one and for some reason just forget about it.
Yes, they can, and that's what I would recommend, is like don't age them on purpose. But my dream is that if you forget a bottle of ours, you should be able to be treated with a good surprise later on.
Because the first Languedoc is it's 2023.
23.
So that's 2 years already.
2 years, but
And drinking beautifully.
imagine you have a good backbone of Nebbiolo, Barbera, and Freisa, which are three really age-worthy grapes. And the Nebbiolo is Nebbiolo. So I still believe these are wines we want to drink. And then I think it also goes with personal preference. If you love your fruitiness in the wines, you will want to drink them in the next 12 months. If you have more of an English taste for what they call bottle scent, so wines with a proper storage that sort of have matured and moved into a secondary, tertiary aromatics, then it's going to be fun to forget a bottle once in a while.
And what do you prefer personally? Younger ones or older wines?
Younger. I think I would love to drink these two wines in the next, literally in the next 12 months.
Is this a matter of generation, you would say? Because if I look to colleagues, like wine colleagues, I quite like young wines in general. I would prefer young wines, to aged wines. But if I look to my colleagues that are slightly older than me, they prefer to have wines with a bit of maturation. Do you think it's an age thing?
I think it is an age thing. It is maybe wisdom. If I think how I was when I was 20 and how I am when I'm now, there's maybe perspectives I'm going to become even more patient in the next 20 years. So I feel that, yes, it might have to do with the personal mood and the personal energy and how much patience we can have. And maybe also over time we get to create a bit of a collection of our own. And the broader the collection, the more passionate we can become. But there is a piece of me where I think is the winemaking piece of me. And at 7 a.m. in a harvest day, I'm tasting 30, 40 ferments. So I'm not scared of the edges. And I think it's just part of who I am. And like trying to get the rodeo with the bowl. Trying to get in the fight with a young wine is something I adore.
So this wine has not been launched. I'm just going to mention that. It will be launched on the 8th of August. Usually it's during summertime, but you will have to wait for another month this time. But it's worth waiting for. It's a very interesting and unique style of wine.
And my FMA, the last bottle you take of Claregia IC goes very well in November with pumpkins.
Oh, really?
I would spare one bottle for the November
So
cuisine.
what do you do with the pumpkins?
Well, I think just more of that Thanksgiving themed use of pumpkin.
It's a
whether it is
Halloween wine.
almost, yeah. And the berries and the white meats. I think is going to be fun.
Cool. Good. No, I'm open. I'm open to the pumpkins. Here we go. Next wine, wine number 4, and we are going to make a bit of a jump. So this is Monterustico. Different wine, different winery,
Yes.
right? So just tell me about this, because this is a place that or a winery that you bought, right?
Yes, this is our newest project in terms of a winery. We started in 2015, so we're getting into the 10th anniversary for this project. This is a good proof to understand the Vajra family is a little crazy, because Monterustico lays in a region just south of Barolo. It's the Dogliani area. When you look at it on a map, it looks much bigger than Barolo, but it's actually an area where viticulture has been pretty much lingering and almost abandoned for a long time now. So it's much more rustic, as the name suggests. It's much wilder of a region with scattered vineyards. Anyway, in 2015, we get a phone call and someone is telling us, you should go and see these vineyards. It was a very specific year. The people following us might know that Alba, the capital town of Piemonte, of the Langhe, is famous for Nutella, among more noble things like white truffle and wine. But we love Nutella. And Nutella takes a lot of hazelnuts in the making. And in 15, for a strange combination of climate factors, hazelnuts became scarce, and the price of hazelnuts was so high that many people struggling to farm dolcetto just decided to give up and move on to grow more hazelnuts. So it was like a break point where a sad day for viticultural history. And so there were vineyards that were risking to be abandoned or converted. And that's when we got the phone call. Someone knew that we have a crush on dolcetto. It's a deep, deep love for this variety. And we should have known that it was a bad idea to go and see the vineyards, because we look at them, we felt in love with them immediately, and then you cannot leave them abandoned when you are already thinking of them in your eyes.
Tragic.
So that's how we started. So Monterustico started as a bit of a crazy project to try and preserve and protect dolcetto first and foremost in the Dogliani area, and then over time it's becoming a bit of the family reservoir to nurture more the concept of biodiversity.
And the DUC Dogliani, Dogliani, that's only for dolcetto, is it?
The designation, yes.
Yeah.
When you read it, Dogliani DOCG, that wine is 100% dolcetto grapes.
So what about the grape? What's typical for the grape?
Well,
It's obviously different color. It's much more fruit driven and not as perfumed, I would say, as maybe as.
So yes, let's start with the color. This is a more violet Venus color. It's actually the most gorgeous color of all Piemonte grapes, at least those that are better known. It is a grape that is like a princess. It requires devotion in the farming, but I think one of the best quotes about dolcetto was said by Beppe Colla, a great winemaker of the 1970s and 80s in the region. He once said that if you check the veins of Piemonte's farmers, you will find equal amounts of blood and dolcetto. Long are the days. Dolcetto became the victim of mechanization when people started to have tractors and grow the ambition to farm more. Dolcetto was uprooted from the beautiful positions where it belongs, which is usually the top of the hills, and pretty much forgotten. But Dolcetto has, I think, as a quality in the glass, as a vinosity. It's an element, the same perfume you smell when you walk into a cellar in September and October, and the juice is fermenting. So it's a mix of like crunchy berries, violet, licorice, Venus elements, like early fermentation elements. This is a young dolcetto that we're tasting, Maja. So it's a wine that if we were to return back in 10 minutes, we will find even more of a bouquet.
Yeah, the
And
licorice is very obvious.
See, and then in the palate, I think the feature of dolcetto is to have low acidity and be quite tart, which makes it for a great bridge to light protein food, as my sister Francesca would define it. So whether it is poultry or just charcuterie on the table. But one big recommendation is dolcetto is not a Netflix wine. Okay, you
It's
want
not.
to have it with the food on the table. That's a red carpet of dolcetto.
Love it. So we actually, well, you got fans, Giuseppe. What a lovely guy. That's just one comment. And then she does have a question. This is now Elizabeth. She says, how many hectares do they have, and how do they harvest? I mean, I suppose she means, is it hand harvesting or machine harvesting or a mix?
It's hand harvested. We might be a little old school romantic, but all the fruit is brought to the winery in small 20-kilo red baskets. And the reason for that is mostly a reason of romance. But when I bring flowers to my spouse, I cannot imagine touring the car to go to the florist and then slamming things is such a bad thing. Slamming the flowers in the car would be the opposite of the gesture of love I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And so when you bring flowers to the person you love, you try to be as gentle as you can. That's why we keep carrying the fruit in small red baskets, is a sense of pampering, is a sense of protection of the fruit, trying to be as gentle as we can with it. As far as the surface, it's today is about 90 hectares surface total among the 3 estates. We love the fact that we can farm them with an amazing team, with the same skill set and the same artisanality of when my dad started. It takes a lot of hard work in the making, and it takes an amazing team. But that's why I almost feel that the greatest pride I have today is about the people who work with us. Because the vines will eventually get wiser and older and produce better wines. But to get to that result, we need an amazing orchestra, an amazing team to farm the vineyards. And that's a joy we have.
Sounds amazing. Patrick says, what a passion, and I can only agree. I also have another comment that I'm not sure if I understand. Will you taste the Barbra Streisand wine?
Oh my God, this is a loaded question.
Is it?
Yeah.
Sorry, maybe I shouldn't.
No, this Patrick is in the know.
It's not Patrick. That's another guy. But
okay.
I'm sorry if I stepped into something. But
No, it's actually no. I think it's a story we're happy to share with everyone. But we have a tiny production that we're not tasting today. You'll recognize when you'll see it, because I think it's due to come later in the year. System Bolaghe. It comes on a light azure label and says Piemonte Barbera Fresa. And in modern days, that was the first co-fermented wine made of Barbera and Fresa. It's a wine that we started producing inspired by a bottle I found, an empty bottle I found from the past. And when I asked my dad, it turned out it was a wine made by my great-grandfather. It was a small vineyard of Barbera and Fresa that he fermented together. I'm sorry, I'm going a little technical.
No, go for it. I'm very interested about the story.
Co-fermentation is one of the big magic and mysteries of wine. Just in 2 words, in mathematics, 2 + 2 always makes 4. When you blend wines, it's more nuanced. But the apex of blending is actually co-fermenting. You take the biggest risk because there's no unfolding, there's no coming back. Co-fermenting basically means you take 2 grapes or more of different varieties and you crush them and ferment them together. And the magic and the gamble of a co-fermentation is that you cannot measure, you cannot do small trials. It's going to be one risk. Anyway, it was the first co-fermented in modern history of Piemonte, and for a long time while the wine was aging, I was wondering, how are we going to label this wine? We have very tricky regulations, and I thought for a long time we're going to call it Barbara Streisand as a game on the more famous singer. Anyway, we eventually found a possibility to have a DOC, and that's Barbara Streisand. But thank you for the question, and I hope you get to taste the wine.
That's someone with insight, obviously.
Oh yeah, big times.
Okay, that's thank you so much. This is I love this tasting. I think it's lots. You can see that people understands your passion about wine, and I can certainly feel it. So wine number 5. There we go. It's the Langhe Nebbiolo. And if I look at this, I mean, if I search it on the Monopoly, it will say organic.
See.
So, and obviously, as you mentioned earlier today, you were pioneers in that field when it comes to organic farming in Piemonte. So, how does it look like now? I mean, the story behind, and also how do you work with sustainable farming?
Well, maybe we'll start with the story.
Yeah.
So when my dad told the family he wanted to become a contadino, I can portray my grandparents almost fainting off their chairs, because they didn't want a hippie son, but they surely didn't want a farmer's son. It was very, very hard days. It was hard to get ends to meet, and it was a bit of a family struggle. They landed on a good deal for everyone, which was my dad accepted to actually continue studying, and my grandparents accepted that he would use his free time to go back to the farm, take it back from the sharecroppers who had been running it for 20 years, and start farming on his own. And so that was the deal. The family simply wanted my father to have a college education, just in case he would change his mind. That's how we met Professor Francesco Garofalo. I'm sorry, I'm going to pronounce the name, but because I think this is a hero in Italian, in the history of Italian agriculture. He was one of the early academics who would be in love with the concept of, we call it today organic farming. They simply call it ecologia agraria back in the days. And it's a picturesque episode when my dad and 3 of his friends would gather at the professor's office to discuss organic farming. The professor would stand up from his desk and would walk to the door, close it, because all the financing, all the research money that would came to the faculty was given by chemical companies. So it was not really the flavor of the day to talk organic. Better people wouldn't listen from the corridor. That's been our start, and that's how Aldo went on to really likely be the first to farm organically a vineyard. His good buddy Lorenzo went on to be the first organic hazelnut farmer of the region, and so on and so forth. I think it's been an amazing evolution, and we couldn't be more grateful to all of our colleagues who, in various ways and forms, with various beliefs, have all embraced a more sustainable concept today. So when you come to Piemonte, it's hard to imagine a greener region these days. It's a garden. It's a marvelously farmed garden, and everyone is doing his own or her own share of work to propel sustainability. What we do at Vajra is to continue on organic certification. All the vineyards are organic certified, but I'm not going to bother anyone with details. We, because of the neighboring situation, when our neighbor is not organic certified, we cannot declare that fruit as organic. So, but you can rest assured all the farming is organic. We also have a sustainable certification, because we find today, and not just today, forever, we always believed that you cannot make an organic wine if you're not a good human. So I think the concept of sustainability for us starts from the people and how you treat them. And in recent days, we've had the chance to acquire certification that allows us to monitor and survey also the third parties, the people who work with us, the suppliers who work with us. So that has been a very important element. It's about carbon footprint. I mean, there's many elements.
Yeah, no, but you can see that as well, like evolving in the wine industry with regenerative farming for which is one thing. That also includes people, which is an important part of that. And also, I think it's you can see that people are thinking beyond the organic label nowadays. And I mean, you can be certified, or you can not be certified, obviously, and still have, the same ideas about how to farm your grapes.
Absolutely, I do think that certifying is a big pain. Let's just say there.
Let's stop there.
But it's something that I only regret 2 days a year, and I'm happy the other 363 days a year, because I think it makes it factual.
Yeah.
It makes it something.
It's a proof. Yeah.
Anyway, the Langhe Nebbiolo.
Yes. I just dipped my nose into it, and this is very much Nebbiolo to me. The rose hips that just jumps out of the glass, which is to me something that I always think of when I try wines like this. It's so very perfumed in a delicate way. Still with power.
When I was starting to work with my family, we're looking at some years back now, there was a common way to present a Nebbiolo, and it was to call it Barolino.
Mm-hmm.
And those of you who might speak some Italian or understand some Italian will know that Ino is the Italian way to say something is cute and little.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhat when I heard Barolino, it also sounded slightly pretentious, like a little bit of a wannabe. And I started to think to myself that Barolino was like a 10-year-old kid stealing his father's jacket and tie and rehearsing with the loudest possible voice in front of the mirror, trying to behave like an adult. And it just didn't fit well with me, that image. Well, that all changed when I saw our own son dressed for a wedding with a bow tie, and I melted like ice in the summer. But anyway, the concept stays true. What we're trying to achieve with this wine is not a Barolino. It's not a little kid trying to show up little biceps and a louder voice. We're actually trying to capture the innocence of the grape, the purity of the aromas of Nebbiolo into this glass. What we should be able to taste is Nebbiolo, just as you described, nothing else.
No, it's a beautiful wine. We got a few more questions. What kind of barrels do you use for maturation?
Well, we mostly use large Slavonian casks.
Mm-hmm.
There are some exceptions and some cases where we might use some French barrels, but when we do so, we really focus on have them as neutral as possible. So sometimes we would buy them as a second hand from Burgundy, so they had the first seasoning with some amazing crew of Pinot Noir, and then they traveled to Italy and
have to choose wisely.
They're not natural, but as a feature, as an element that defines our winemaking, that would be the traditional large Slavonian casks.
We also get a few questions about vintages. What is a good vintage, or a really good vintage in Barolo, in your opinion? What makes a good vintage? Quite a big question.
Well, I don't have a scripted answer for any question, but especially for these. So allow me to speak from my heart. I think as a farmer, there's nothing like a perfect vintage. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There are easier vintages and more difficult vintages, but when we are in the farming season, every cloud in the sky is a potential threat. Every ray of light, we don't know if we're going to see it as a friend or foe. What I think makes a good wine is, sure, some conditions and some vintages are easier and potentially likely will produce greater wines, but it's also a lot about the love, the care, and the devotion of farming. And that devotion means you're going to sacrifice. You're going to maybe produce half the crop you were hoping for, but it's just going to be bringing to the cellar, fermenting the best possible fruit, the fruit that really stands out as being gorgeous. So I always encourage people to think it's every vintage is beautiful in that it brings a unique personality. And then I think is a lot about knowing the farmers and trusting that they have that engagement. And I'm sure I'm sure you will find passionate, loving farmers in every country, region of the world. People who will sacrifice quantity to deliver quality. That being said, and to try and be a bit more specific, I think the way I try to describe vintages is like trying to define a personality profile for each of them. So 24, for example, which was very hard in the farming. We had a lot of rain. It was really, really challenging. I think I got twice as many gray hair after 2024. But 24 is a vintage for people who like Humphrey Bogart. Who like mystery and classicism, because I think that the lower temperatures allowed for a very classic vintage with lower alcohol levels, pristine, pure aromatics. The wines are not loud in the glass; they will unfold. But the more we're bottling the wines from 24, the more we see an amazing aromatic potential. 23. A bit more outgoing, a bit more like an Italian in the middle of Sweden. It'll stand out as being louder and talking more and maybe not as polite, but it brings a bit of joyful chaos, and I think that's 23. It was a sunny vintage, slightly higher alcohol levels, but with a lot of fun. 22 was a very early vintage, very dry, so people who like full-bodied wines will have a lot of fun with the 2022 vintage. They will find ripeness of fruit. It will be just like when you eat the most mature, beautiful strawberries of the season, and you know the moment you're eating them, that's it. That's the peak, and I think that's 22. In fact, it has a lot of strawberry tones, but it's a sunny, happy vintage. 21 is a bit more of a nerdy vintage. Again, we're going back to the mystery, to the more reserved Piedmontese personality. The wines take a little more to unfold in the glass, but when they do, it's a beautiful talk.
Do you have any, what I would call a Shrek vintage? It's almost like an underdog vintage in a sense. We got that question from someone as well. Do you have any underdog vintages that you think have received? But you know what I mean. You know, a Shrek person is someone that you think is very messy and a bit maybe you don't like him in the beginning, but at the end of the movie you love that character.
Well, that's the thing. I'm embarrassed to report I never watched Shrek from start to end. But
that's fine. He's big and green and quite loud.
I know what we're talking about. And I think for Piemonte, the two Shrek vintages that we had in recent days were 2014 and 2018. Two vintages that I personally have always defended from the start. But it took a moment to win the heart of people, because the reputation of the vintages was to be difficult. And sometimes we misunderstand the meaning of words and we think difficult is bad, which is not. We all know that in personal life, some of the difficult days led to the most important steps of our personal life.
Sure.
However, that was a bit of the reputation that needed to be won in 14 and 18. But as the wines progress, I just had a 2018 Barolo Ravera earlier today, and it was beautiful. So I think that might be the two Shrek vintages, and I really encourage you to watch the movie till the end because they are beautiful wines.
I completely agree. So we are on the last wine. We have a couple of minutes left, and this is now the top stuff, so to speak. This is Albe Barolo. Different label again.
Yes. When you'll come and visit us, we'll walk you into a blue room. A blue room because it's the winemaking room colored with stained glass windows. That was a dream. I've been talking about my dad, but Vajra would not be Vajra without Milena, who's our mom, Aldo's wife. As the winery wouldn't be the same without her love and daily contribution. And in fact, both the idea of having stained glass windows in the winery and the name of this Barolo are two of her ideas. Mom and Dad were building a new space, and they were dreaming for the winery to carry the colors, the joy, the beauty of nature. When you're out in the vineyards, even if you had a bad start of the day, unless your heart is made of stone, you cannot deny life is beautiful. Because when you look around and you see the nature and the gorgeous touch of it, you realize you better be grateful. But when you're in the cellar, sometimes works get a little more mechanical. Your head goes down to gravity. Because of gravity, we needed something to remind us about beauty. And so that was the idea of the stained glass windows. They were designed by another artist by the name of Costantino Ruggeri, the most incredible, fantastic and fantasious monk you would imagine. And we asked him years later to design a label for this wine. Albe is Italian for sunrises. If you don't believe it, I'll give you the coordinates so you'll go and experience yourself. We can see 3 times the sunrise every morning on the 3 vineyards we blend in this wine. You just have to go in the right order from the southeast vineyard Fossati to La Volta and then Cosse di Vergne. And the inspiration for this wine was to pay homage to the great winemakers of the past. And the great Barolos, they were always made as a blend of vineyards. Blending vineyards was the chance to achieve a more harmonious, elegant, poised Barolo. And that's the inspiration for Albe. So 3 sunrises, and that's why the colorful label is to remind the colors of the sunrise.
Wow. 2 questions. Patrick says, is it possible to come and stay at your place? Do you have accommodation?
We don't. We
Sorry,
try to
Patrick.
do one work and with all of our focus. But the good news is there's no shortage of amazing hotels and bed and breakfast and accommodation in the region. We'll find a way to get you a good, cool list of contacts and places. And it's going to be a very hospitable region.
And then we have a comment from a guy called Lars. He says, if the wines are as good as he is a good storyteller, I should buy all of them. So that was a very, that was a nice comment. And I agree with Lars.
I'm embarrassed and grateful, but let me just say that the wines are actually better. I'm the worst of the family.
No, he's being very humble now.
No, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a heart surgeon or to make wine, and I passed the exam to go both colleges, and it was Thursday night, and the clock was ticking. I had to sign up by Friday morning, or I would have lost a year of college education. So that night, I asked my dad, "Papa, what is the social purpose of your job?" It was the longest silence I think I've ever heard from my father. He's a very profound, thoughtful man. But that night he stood silent for what seemed forever. 10 years later, he actually admitted he didn't have an answer on the spot because he chose to become a farmer so young. He was not thinking about social implications of what you do. But eventually he replied in a beautiful way. He said, "Giuseppe, if you want to save lives, go be a doctor, because it will be a more immediate way to do it. But look at that painting." And he finger pointed a beautiful painting my parents have in their dining room. "We don't need it to live." Says we don't need poetry or music to live. We don't even need a good meal and a good glass of wine. But what would be life, human life, without beauty? And I think that comment is the very reason why the next day I signed up at the Viticulture and Winemaking Institute. And this is what I desire from the work we do. It's not the touch from the quality, because I think to touch the heart of people, we need the best farming, the best winemaking. And the words are simply who we are, what we do to accompany these vines to make some beautiful grapes and hopefully turn into some beautiful wines. I
also love the fact that you were supposed to be a heart surgeon. Of all parts in the body, you chose the heart. So I'm not going to say more than that. Actually, we sort of run out of time, which is I'm not sure how that happened. So we're just going to do one more thing, and that's just picking a winner of today's all the questions that we got. So it feels almost a bit sad now to just end this conversation.
But we have a trick. We can choose the winner while I share one more quick story about Barolo.
Absolutely.
But just in a funny, ironic way. I always tell people, when you come to Piemonte, you can talk soccer and politics, but do not walk into a local wine bar asking people who invented Barolo, because you're going to trigger a fight among locals. However, it's quite a beautiful story. There's basically 2 parties. just like in the Barolo Wars. And I'm 100% convinced the person who gave the most input in the making of Barolo was a French lady by the name of Juliette Colbert. That might explain why we're a slight minority in the region. But anyway, Juliette and her husband, Carlo Falletti, were some of the people who silently did the most good in the region in those days of middle of the 1800s. They created and founded so many charities for orphans, for people who needed a second chance. And you don't need to know all the details, or I'll tell this story in a more detailed way. Shall I?
No. You got to do your story.
But
I think that was the winner.
Okay.
Yes.
So I don't want to know anyone with the details, but I just would like to encourage you to dive deeper, because what I love about Barolo is that it's not just a beautiful, famous wine because it is beautiful, but it was first imagined, designed, created by some very special people. And that's, I think, is a good wish for all of us, that when we are generous with our hearts, we also become creative in life and full of taste. And I think that's a reward of a generous life. So that's a wish when you drink Barolo, thinking of these.
I have one question for you. Can you adopt me? I would love to just come and stay with your family. It sounds
deal.
Sounds lovely.
Well,
no.
Who is the
winner of the competition? Okay, so the winner today is Veronica Helin. Congratulations, Veronica. You, we will send you a couple of these beautiful Nebbiolo glasses by post. So just make sure that you get back to us with details for address and stuff, so we can find you. I'm not sure what to say, Giuseppe. This was amazing. It's been an absolutely fantastic tasting. I've never experienced a tasting where we didn't actually talk that much about the wines as the wines, but we did talk about everything else. And I think you sold the whole region and your company, your wines and yourself to the audience. And I'm so happy to have been spending some time with you tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
Tack så mycket
Tack
to
så
everyone.
mycket.
Keep us in your hearts and glasses, and I hope to see you soon in Barolo.
Cheers.
Salute.
Salute.
Grazie Maja.